Section 4.1, Place Value and Rounding. This section talks about many aspects of decimals: reading and writing decimals, rounding decimals, comparing decimals, and changing decimals to fractions, and fractions to decimals. First, let's look at the place value of decimals. Our decimal number is called a base 10 decimal number system, and the reason for that is because every time that you move from one of the decimal place values to the one to the left, the value of the number increases by 10. You multiply by 10, so that's why it's called the base 10 system. The numbers on the left-hand side of this place value are the whole numbers, and the numbers on the right-hand side are known as the decimals. And notice that there's a decimal point in between to separate the two. One other thing to notice is that except for the ones place value, there's a mirror image for every place value that is a whole number place value with a decimal place value. For instance, we have the tens and we have the tenths, we have the hundreds and we have the hundredths, we have the thousands and we have the thousandths, and so forth, the 10,000ths and the 10,000s. So every single one of these has a mirror image. Although you will not be tested on this skill per se, it is important to be able to read and write decimal numbers. The number I have right here is 3 and 48 hundredths. And I have 48 hundredths, so I say the number 48, followed by whatever place value is the last place value that I have a significant digit. So if I were to add a 6 here, now the number I have is 3 and 486 thousandths. If I were to add a 7, now the number would be 3 and 4,867 10,000ths. Notice I said 3 and 4,867 because I'm looking at this entire number. If I added another number here, now I have 3 and 48,672 hundred thousandths. And if I added one more, then I would have 3 and 486,721 millionths. Of course, it's not very often that someone is going to see this particular number, 3.486721, and call it that. They're probably just going to say, oh, it's the number 3.486721, instead of giving the actual place value name for this last one. But once again, I do think that's something that is important to be able to do if needed. How do you write the number 4 and 2,000ths? Take a second, if you would, and just jot down how to write that number just using numbers on a scrap piece of paper before I talk about it. Okay, 4 and 2,000ths. If I wanted to write the number 4 and 2,000ths, I have 4 and, my decimal point means and I need to go out to thousandths place. So that means that if I do that, I'm going to have a 2 in thousandths place with a couple zeros for placeholders. So, in order to write the number 4 and 2,000ths, I get 4.002. Notice that this is different than the number 4 and 200 thousandths. If I wanted to write the number 4 and 200 thousandths, once again, I'm going to need to put a 4 in the ones place, 4 dot, but I need 200 thousandths. So before I can say the word thousandths, I need the number 200. So it would be 4 and 200 thousandths would be written like this. Now, because these are just zeros, they're really placeholders, I don't even need them, which does show you that 4 and 200 thousandths is exactly the same thing as 4.2 or 4 2/10. I have 5 different numbers listed here. Which one of the 5 is the smallest number? Which one's the largest number? If you would, take a moment and stop this video and put these numbers in order from least to greatest, and then turn this back on again. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to put the numbers in order from least to greatest. As I take a look at all these numbers, the smallest number that is here is the 3.743. And the reason for that is because all of the numbers have the whole number of 3. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the tenths place. There are 2 numbers that have a 7 in the tenths place. And since they have a 7 in the tenths place, now I have to compare what number they have in the hundredths place. The 3.743 has a 4 in the hundredths, while the other one has a 6. So that is the smallest number. The next smallest number is the 3.76. After that, the other numbers that I have all have 8 in the tenths place. So I need to now look at their hundredths place. The 3.8 doesn't have anything listed here, so there's an understood 0. And the 3.807 also has a 0 in the hundredths place. So now I need to go to the thousands place. There's not a number in the thousands place. I can put in an understood 0. This one has a 7. So that means that the 3.8 number is the next smallest. After that, I would have 3.807, followed by the largest number in the group, 3.81. Putting decimal numbers in order from least to greatest is really similar to just doing something in alphabetical order. For instance, if you were given the words cat, cake, caulk, and cup, you know to put them in alphabetical order, they all start with a C. So now I need to take a look at the second one. These 3 start with A's, so now I need to take a look at the third one and put those in order. So obviously this one would come first, this one would come second, cat would come third, followed by cup coming fourth. Putting decimal numbers in order works exactly the same way. You just have to make sure that you are comparing place values as you are doing it. In addition to writing decimals in order, you will also need to put a combination of fractions and decimals in order from least to greatest. So first, let's talk about writing fractions as decimals and decimals as fractions. Let's say that you were given the fraction 23 over 100. Well, 23 over 100 means 23 hundredths. So, in order to write that as a decimal, we're just going to write it having our knowledge of decimal place value going out to 2 places for hundredths as 0.23. If you were given the fraction 351 thousandths, you know that you need to go out to thousandths place, which is 3 places, so it would be 0.351. How about if you were given the fraction 53 tenths? Well, from our earlier work, you know 53 tenths is an improper fraction, and it could be changed to a mixed number. I'm not going to go through all the work right now of doing it, but I am going to write it as a mixed number. 53 tenths would be 5 3/10 if you did the division. 5 3/10 would just be 5.3. So even if you have an improper fraction, you can write it as a decimal. Let me give you one more. How about 209 10,000ths? For 10,000ths place, we need to go out 4 different place values, because I have the tenths, I have the hundredths, I have the thousandths, and I have the 10,000ths. If I need 209 10,000ths, the 209 needs to go out 4 places from the decimal point, to the right of the decimal point. So I'm going to need a 0 as a placeholder in the tenths place. So 209 10,000ths is 0.0209. Now notice in this particular case, all of the fractions that I gave you have a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. We will talk later on about how to write fractions in decimal form if they do not have that type of denominator. So let's go the other way. Let's start with the decimal and change it to a fraction. As long as you know your place value, this is a fairly easy thing to do. If I was given the decimal 0.17, I know that that's 17 hundredths. So if I want to write that as a fraction, I am just going to write it that way, 17 hundredths. If I was given the decimal 3.58, I know that is 3 and 58 hundredths. So I could write it as 3 and, I'm going to have a mixed number, 3 and 58 hundredths. If I wanted to, I could put that 58 hundredths in lowest terms, but there's no real need to do it. 3.58 is equal to 3 and 58 hundredths as a mixed number. How about if you had 2.004? If you have 2.004, you know that's 2 and 4 thousandths is the way that you say that. So I would just be writing 2 and 4 thousandths that I would be writing as my fractional part of my mixed number. Writing decimals to fractions, as I say, as long as you know the names of the place values, is generally fairly simple. Earlier, we took a set of decimal numbers and we put them in order from the smallest to the greatest. Here's an example where we have a mixture. Some numbers are written in decimal form, some numbers are written in fraction form, and we are asked to put these in order as well. So it would be much easier if I had all the numbers written either as decimals or as fractions. And it is certainly easier if I have everything written as decimals. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to rewrite the fractions as decimals. I have 39 hundredths. 39 hundredths written as a decimal is 0.39. 38 thousandths written is 0.038. So now I have everything written in decimal form. Now, just to make this maybe a little bit easier, I am going to rewrite all the decimals I have just so everything is lined up here so I can do a little bit better job of comparing the place values. And now I've written all those numbers in decimal form. They all start with a 0, so now I need to start looking at the tenths place. As I take a look at this, I see that there is a 0 in the tenths place in the first number, there's a 0 in the tenths place in the fourth number, and there's a 0 in the tenths place in the last number. So now I need to go through and I need to take a look at the hundredths place. Well, when I start to take a look at the hundredths place, I see there's a 4, there's a 3, and a 3. So the two numbers with the 3 in the hundredths place are going to have to come before that number with the 4. Now I need to take a look at the thousandths place. The thousandths place, they both have 8s. So that does not help me, and I need to go to the next place, which would be the 10,000ths place. When I take a look at the 10,000ths place, there is no number in the 10,000ths place in the 38 thousandths. So I could put an understood 0 there. That has a 0, the other one has a 2. So the very first number that I have is this particular number is the smallest number, and I'm going to rewrite it the way it was originally written. 38 thousandths is the way it was originally written. And now I don't need to worry about that number anymore. The next one, because of what we just talked about, would have to be the 0.0382, which is 382 10,000ths. Then remember, when we first started, we said that this number, the very first number, also had a 0 in the tenths place. So that's going to have to be the next number. So that's going to be 0.04. Now I only have two numbers left, 39 hundredths and 37 hundredths. They both have a 3 in the tenths place, so I have to look at the hundredths place. This has a 7, the other one has a 9. 7 smaller than 9, so my next number is going to be 0.37, followed by my last number, which is going to be the 39 hundredths, but once again I'm going to write it the way it was originally written, as 39 hundredths. So being able to put these numbers in order from the smallest to the greatest makes a lot of sense if you just first of all change everything to decimal form and then follow those same rules. The last idea to talk about in this section is the idea of rounding decimals. The rules are the same as when we rounded whole numbers. Let's say that you were given the number 5.842 and you were asked to round this to the nearest tenth. If I'm asked to round this to the nearest tenth, I would go through and I would underline the tenths place, which is an 8. And I would put an X over the place value just to the right of it. Since that is a 4 underneath the X, that tells me I'm not going to do anything with the 8, and I'm going to leave it the same, so my answer is just 5.8. If I was given this number, 2.3576, and asked to round that to the nearest thousandth, once again, I go through and I underline the thousandths place, and I put an X just to the right of that. Since that is a 6, I know that I have to add 1 to the underlined digit. So my answer to that would be 2.358, or 2 358 thousandths. Let's say that you were given the number 2.97, and you were asked to round that one to the nearest tenth. This is one that sometimes people struggle with a little bit more, but the process works exactly the same. I'm going to underline the tenths place, put an X just to the right of that. Since that is a 7, I know I need to add 1 to the tenths place. But when I add 1 to the tenths place, 9 plus 1 gives me 10. So I'm going to have to regroup that and take it over to the ones place. So 2.97 to the nearest tenth would be 3. Sometimes in your homework you are going to see also that you are asked to round to the nearest cent. So let me give you an example. 752.595 dollars. Now it's not very often that you see this, but you do see this at times when you're working, say, with the prices of gas, prices of very small things. Sometimes they do go out past cents. Let's say I wanted to round this to the nearest cent. Well, the nearest cent is that 9. Cent means hundredth. So I'm going to underline the 9. I'm going to put an X by the 5. Once again, because the number underneath the X is 5 or greater, I'm going to add 1 to the hundredths place. But when I do that, I'm going to have to add 9 plus 1, get 10. I'm going to have to regroup. I'm going to get 60. So to the nearest cent, my answer would be $752.60. As always, if you have any questions about any of the material presented in this video, please ask so I can help you. Thank you.